Shakespeare never wrote an original story ever in his whole life. Most of his stuff was taken from histories. It was the way he told it and the way that he was able to make the story effective to his audience. That's what made it great. He then goes on to criticize the film in depth on how much time and effort they put into making the Na'vi beautiful and appealing to humans. But as I've already covered about beauty and appealing to emotion, that's not a valid criticism. He compares it to District 9 and saying, well, those were ugly aliens, but yet we were able to associate with them and feel compassion with them and empathize with them. And he's right. District 9 is a brilliant film. I might even, go so far as to say, yeah, it's a better film than Avatar is. I love District 9, but I also love Avatar, and I have no problem with making the Na'vi very attractive. It makes sense. It almost seems as if he's saying that Avatar should have been District 9. Well, it's not District 9. It's a different movie. Why would James Cameron, if in fact he had done the same type of things with his creatures in Avatar that they did with the creatures in District 9, you'd probably be criticizing it right now for ripping off District 9. So, arguments like this, the person could never win. So there really is no problem in my mind with making the aliens attractive. There've been ugly aliens in movies, there've been attractive aliens in movies. And yeah, you might think it feels more simple to try to get your audience to empathize with the aliens by making them attractive rather than giving them, in your opinion, more depth. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't also given the Na'vi depth. There is depth there. Maybe it's not as a character-driven film as District 9 is, but that doesn't mean there's no depth or subtext there. There's a lot here. And unfortunately, I think people who criticize it on this level are missing it. I mean, it kind of makes me think of example of like elves. Elves are generally drawn as very attractive. They're not human. They're alien in a certain definition of the term. And yet people don't really seem to have a problem with that. Why is it suddenly a problem with the Na'vi? It just doesn't make sense. So here we start part 2 of his review. And one of the things I'll mention here is he never actually mentions what's-his-face, the other young guy who's going to eventually take over the tribe in the Na'vi. We don't really like him. He's put in his competition with Jake, and yeah, I can feel you saying already, oh, this is formulaic. He has to fight against the traditional boyfriend that she's supposed to marry or whatever, and that's been done. Well, yeah, it's been done. But that doesn't mean that the actor's portrayal of the character is shallow or ineffective or bad in any way, and that their interactions can't be good. And it is a dynamic relationship. They end up forging a relationship. They end up respecting each other and helping each other at the end. The worst part about all this is he's talking as if the sexual attraction between the two main characters is the only reason why Jake is willing to go off and fight. Oh, they tore down my tree, he says. So, that is totally ignoring all the other aspects of the film. Jake isn't there and doing all this just because he's fallen in love with this girl. I mean, yeah, that has helped him come to the realization so quickly, which, because we've only got like 3 hours to do this in, but that's not the only reason he's doing it, and it's not the only reason the audience is supposed to feel that he's doing it. This is not just a love story. The love story aspect is simply there so these characters can make a connection. The real reason why he goes against his entire pre-existing way of life and his own race, etc., is not because he's got the hots for some blue chick, It's because of all the other reasons I've already talked about. He even poses the question, would this Marine have found his inner conscious and chosen to help this unique culture if she was not perfect jagoff material? Well, the answer is, we have no idea. That's not what this movie is. Because part of the aspect of this movie is these two characters making a connection and falling in love. But again, it's not the only reason. And yes, it's very conceivable that he could have found a culture of creatures that he had no sexual attraction to and helped them. That would have been a very different movie, and maybe you think it would have been a better movie. Well, fine, you know what? That movie's probably out there somewhere, or that book is probably out there somewhere. I bet it is. Go take a look. Make it into a movie if you want. But wishing that this movie was something else just because you don't like the fact that they made the aliens attractive, this is very weak stuff. He then brings up the only thing I agree with him about, the whole what's in a name bit. Unobtainium. Yes, that is the dumbest name for any plot device in film history. I completely agree. What a terrible, awful frickin' choice. However, who cares? It's not a big deal. It's in like one line, maybe two in the whole film. I'm sure Cameron and his whole production crew or whatever thought about it a lot. We're thinking about the meanings of the word unobtainium, the symbolism of the word, and meaning this is the pursuit of a resource that will never be fulfilled. You can't really ever satiate your lust or your drive to get it, but ultimately it's this meaningless thing. We never really find out what unobtainium is used for. And that's probably totally on purpose, because that doesn't matter. What matters is this unbridled, unchecked exploitation of resources for no other reason but profit. That is the purpose of that in the film. So attacking the film because they made a stupid choice on naming the mineral, again, is it's just a pejorative attack, There's nothing of substance here. And then he goes on and plays a little letter-changing game with Navi and turns it into Naive when there isn't even the right amount of letters to do that. He's just playing around having fun. He's trying to be funny, but, he's making a review in which he's criticizing Avatar, and still, to this point, I still have yet to see anything that's really all that much more than a pejorative attack. And I'm not sure why so many people feel the need to criticize this film in the way they do. I think some people just want to criticize it because it's so successful, and they want to feel mentally superior by criticizing the film that everybody loves and that is, one of the biggest box office successes of all time. I think that's very likely. Not everyone, and I don't think Mike necessarily is doing that here. But I think people that are criticizing the movie, and even people that like the movie, are probably missing most of the best stuff in it, and that's a real shame. He then talks about summing up Cameron's motives for making this film. One, to solidify his position as king of the world, which seems to be just a throwback to his apparent hatred of Cameron for reasons unknown. Then he says to solidify his position, supplanting George Lucas as, the person pushing the envelope on movie technology, which is ironic since ILM helped on the special effects for this film. Anyway, the last one is that he says Cameron wanted to make an original film. And again, this is where I think people are totally missing the point. I don't think Cameron wanted to make an original story or film at all. It's so glaringly obvious that this is not an original story. Why on earth would you think that Cameron was trying desperately to make an original story? No, he's just trying to tell a story that is a solid story, in its fundamentals, but like I said, in a way that hadn't really been done before, a unique, telling of that story with some new things thrown in and in a new way with new methods. And as Mike admitted, his execution and his effectiveness at it was remarkable. So I don't really understand why he's criticizing the movie. He says he gets a creepy vibe that
it's some kind of ego-driven technological reason behind the movie.
And as I said, I don't think anything could be further from the truth. This seems to be just his personal opinion on why Cameron made the film. But there's so much other messaging in this movie. That's why I think Cameron made this film. Why else would you make a film with all this, in Mike's words, heavy-handed messaging? Cameron didn't make this film just because he wanted to develop all these new technologies. Sure, that was a part of it, but he chose this story because he wanted to convey all these messages and all these meanings. Why else do you make movies?